Hello, my name is Marcus Benz and welcome to video 1 of Vaccine School. In this video we're going to be looking at the question, what are vaccines? Just an introduction at the start of this, I am a registered nurse. I've been working for over a decade in pediatrics. I am getting a graduate degree in nursing education at Missouri State University, and I am working through my college as well as with Mercy Hospital in Springfield, Missouri to bring you these courses. So in this video, we're going to look at a couple of questions. We're going to answer, what are vaccines? What are antigens? What's the difference between live and inactivated vaccines? And what are adjuvants? So what are vaccines? Vaccines are not new. They've been around for a long time in some form or another. There's evidence that people were practicing what's called inoculation as long ago as 1000 AD, if not even before that. Inoculation is whenever you take the infectious material from someone who's sick with the disease and expose it to someone who is healthy in a potentially more controlled manner. So this is really gross, but it would include taking off the scraping of skin where someone had the infectious rash and then putting it on the inside of the nose or making a cut on the skin and rubbing it on that. It was meant to be more controlled and hopefully more localized instead of someone getting a full-blown case of the disease. As you can guess, this was a very risky thing to do because you ran the risk of actually giving someone the disease you were trying to protect against. But the thing that we really need to keep in mind is that at the time, it seemed worth the risk. Smallpox was incredibly deadly, and that's one of the earliest inoculation attempts. But they were so desperate for some type of cure because they couldn't fight it otherwise, that they would try this to potentially build immunity from this controlled exposure. So, answering the question, what are antigens? Antigens are a key ingredient in vaccines. If we take a bacteria, on the outside wall of the bacteria, we're going to see a little protein sticking off. These surround the cell. They're all around the bacterial wall. These are called antigens. If a healthy cell meets up with a bacteria, healthy cells will have a receptor that can link up with a specific antigen, and this is how cells communicate. This is how all cells communicate. That's a normal thing. It's how cells will tell one another what's going on in the body by transferring that information from one to another. What bacteria and viruses do is they use this linkage to cause damage to the healthy cell. They will either link up and tell the healthy cell to get inflamed and then burst, or they will take this linkage to tell the cell to start reproducing the viral or bacterial genetic material. So what they're basically doing is they are taking over a healthy cell to reproduce the bacteria or the virus so that the bacteria or virus can spread. So I mentioned that the body uses antigens to communicate normally. The immune system can use antigen communication. The immune system carries with it memory of past infections. And what that means is the immune system has a memory of antigens in the past that caused damage to the body. And so if the immune cell finds a bacteria and recognizes the antigen on the outside of the bacteria as something that the body does not want from past experience, it will then trigger the bacteria to burst and kill itself. So now we get to how vaccines use antigens. Antigens are taken from a bacteria or a virus, but the rest of the bacteria or virus is no longer able to cause infection, and we'll get into how that's done later. The antigens are then put into the vaccine, and then whenever that's injected, it allows our immune system to find those antigens and build immunity without the risk of the infection from the actual bacteria or virus. So now let's get into how vaccines use bacteria or viruses that can no longer cause an infection. The two most common types of vaccines that people generally ask about are live or inactivated vaccines. So let's look at the differences. Inactivated vaccines use a bacteria or virus that has been killed. So the shell of the bacteria or virus is still there. The inside of the bacteria or virus is dead, but the outer part is still present. So the antigens are still on the shell, and that is what is put into the vaccine, which then makes the vaccine work. So what are live vaccines? Live vaccines use a bacteria or a virus that have been raised in a non-human environment. Usually this is on egg proteins. So the virus or bacteria has lived multiple life cycles, only reproducing in egg proteins. This means that the bacteria or virus cannot live in the human environment. It has to have those egg proteins to reproduce. So the bacteria or virus are then put into the vaccine, and the antigens that are still on the outside form the immunity, but the live bacteria or virus, because it can't survive in a human host, quickly dies and is broken down. The last vaccine ingredient we're going to look at in this video are adjuvants. Adjuvants are a very important ingredient to vaccines. A really common one that's used in a lot of vaccines is aluminum. We're going to get into why aluminum is used in a later video, but we can use that as the example in this video. The aluminum is injected into the body at the same time as the rest of the vaccine, and that signals more immune cells to come to the injection site. Because there are more immune cells there, it means that you're going to build your immunity better and faster because you have more immunity activity going on at that injection site. Also, because there's more immune cells there, you can actually put less antigens in the vaccine because you are going to have a greater number of immune cells there, creating that immunity memory. So you don't have to put as many antigens in because the adjuvants trigger a better immune response. This is really important because a lot of people get concerned about the number of antigens that are in vaccines. The number of antigens that are in current vaccines are actually less than were in previous vaccines. The original smallpox vaccine had more antigens in it than all of the childhood vaccines that are given now combined. And so if you think about vaccines that you received whenever you were a child, those actually had more antigens in it than probably what your child would get, because we've just developed vaccine technology to such an extent that they're so much more effective than they used to be. So less antigens are able to be used because of the adjuvants. So to summarize, adjuvants make the vaccine more effective with less antigens. So let's review. Antigens are the ingredient in vaccines that trigger the immune system to create immunity for the bacteria or virus we're wanting to protect against. All vaccines include bacteria or viruses that are not able to create infection. They've either been killed or they've been inactivated or broken down into a way that they cannot cause an infection for the bacteria we're trying to protect against, or the virus. Adjuvants create more effective vaccines by creating a stronger immune response so that we build a better immunity with less antigens. They make the vaccines much more effective. And all of these ingredients are much safer than the way that we used to try to create immunity through inoculation. Inoculation, remember, you were taking infectious material and giving it to a healthy person in the hopes that they would build immunity and not get the full-blown illness. So if we're trying to compare what they used to do that did work to some degree, we are doing something that's much more safer than the ancient practices. So that's the end of our first video on what are vaccines. These are the references for what the information that was given in this video. They're also going to be posted below this video on the site, as well as in the reference tab of the website. If you have more questions, please go to these links. They're going to help you find more information, more in-depth information than what I presented here. This was meant to be a starting off point, just to get you some answers, to hopefully demystify some things. But if you still have questions, these websites are great resources to find all sorts of information that can answer pretty much any question you might have. Thank you. Bye.